Hello, welcome back to my channel. You're watching What Helen Reads and I'm Helen. Today I've got another first and favourites video for you. So I've seen lots of people doing a first and favourites style of video, and I decided to do a series of these over a couple of months. So I've already done one which is a first and favourites in terms of authors that I like to read. I'm going to be recording a first and favourites Mafia romance edition version of this video, and today I'm bringing you my sub-genre edition. So they'll all be romances, but there's lots of sub-genres of romance books that I like to read. And when I broke it down, there was actually 16 in total that I read on a regular basis. Because it's first and favourite, obviously that would be 32 books as a minimum in total if I only stick to one in each category. So I decided to split this in half. So basically we're going to have part one today and then part two at another point in time. So in terms of these first and favourites, I am going to reference the last couple of years of reading from really when I've been keeping a record of the books that I've read, because I probably have read books prior to the year sort of 2020, but I haven't kept a log of those, and you know, some of them are not as memorable. Okay, so we've got a lot of books to get through, so let's kick off with the first subgenre of romance books that I absolutely love, and I'm kicking off of course with Mafia romances because I absolutely love a Mafia romance. In fact, like I said, I've got a whole series of videos that focus just on Mafia romances. I call those Mafia Romance Mondays, and they usually go out on the second Monday of every month, so keep an eye out for those, and check out my playlist for that as well. I definitely remember the first Mafia romance I ever read, and that was only in 2021, and I picked up Dark Russian Angel by Odette Stone. Now, I'd read quite a few of Odette Stone's sports romances. She's done a series of ice hockey romances. I really love those. Wanted to read more by her and came across this Dark Russian Angel, which is book one in her Vancouver Mafia series, and there's only actually 2 books in this series so far. I don't know if she's planning to write any more. But like I said, this was my very first kind of taster of Mafia romances, particularly Russian Mafia romances, and I've never kind of looked back. So this story is kind of a close proximity romance. The heroine witnesses a crime and then she kind of has to stay with the hero for protection, and of course while they're in close proximity together their romance kind of sparks. This is also a virgin heroine in this one as well, and we are following Andrusha and Olivia. And essentially what happens is Olivia is basically a ballet dancer, but she is injured and can no longer dance ballet professionally, and while she is looking for work she ends up working as a dancer in this kind of like this strip club. And then one night when she's leaving work, obviously it's quite late at night, the car park is very dark, but of course with a lot of these Mafia romances she witnesses a crime where she sees somebody basically shooting another person, and then basically becomes the star witness. She does the right thing. She basically contacts the police and they put her into witness protection while they're waiting for the trial to come up, and this is the perfect opportunity from a police perspective because they've been looking to put this person away in prison, and now, like I say, she is the star witness. Now, he is a Mafia person, but he isn't our Mafia hero. In fact, he is a rival Mafia gang to Andrusha, and Andrusha hears about Olivia, the fact that she is a witness to a crime and that she's also the star witness that's going to basically put his you know, competitor away in prison, and so he has a very vested interest that she stays alive. And when you know, there are obviously some dirty police officers who you know, put her in danger, and people come and try to you know, take her out of witness protection and unalive her, Andrusha steps in basically and takes her for himself, and then keeps her safe in a safe location where he's going to keep an eye on her, make sure she's protected until the court date, and then she can go and basically go to court. So that's kind of his interest in this. Of course, after he then takes her captive, he is now going to be in close proximity with her, and their relationship is going to go from there. It's actually quite a light Mafia romance story, isn't actually that dark, but really gave me a taste for Mafia romances, and I haven't looked back since. And in particular, Russian mafia romances have remained my favourite. And since I read this book in 2021, I've read quite a lot of mafia romances, and I had to think long and hard about my favourite. I've got 2 books that I want to talk about today, but I think my absolute favourite is this one here, which is Ruthless Creatures by JT Geisinger, and this is a Russian mafia story, book 1 in the Queens and Monsters series, and we're following Cage and Natalie. I have got a couple of versions of this book because I love it so much, but this particular one is not only signed by the author, but it was also annotated for me by Jen from the Book Refuge. So Jen, if you're watching, thank you very much for annotating this book for me and sending it my way, because like I say, it is my absolute favourite. So this basically starts where our heroine Natalie is basically in mourning for the loss of her fiance. He disappeared 5 years ago, literally the day before they were due to get married, and she doesn't know what's happened to him, but she very much suspects that he is no longer alive. He literally, like I said, just disappeared, and there was a big police investigation, lots of people looking for him, but he was never found. But she's never really been able to move on. She is heartbroken by what's happened. She really can't move on with her life, and she is really struggling. But it's now, like I say, the 5-year anniversary since he passed away, and in the state that she is in after this amount of time has passed, if the body isn't found, basically, then the person will be declared dead. So her best friend, who is very prominent character in this series, Sloane, basically offers to take her out for a drink and tries to talk her into, you know, finally giving away her wedding dress and moving on with her life. And I absolutely love the banter between these 2 characters. So Sloane and Natalie have absolutely an amazing friendship, and the banter between them is absolutely fantastic. And then the night that they go out together, they're drinking, you know, lots of cocktails and things like that, and in the bar they see this very mysterious but handsome man who turns out to be Cage. Well, it turns out that he is there because he is in the mafia. He is now the next door neighbour for Natalie, and he's also looking for Natalie's ex-fiance, because it turns out that the ex-fiance wasn't who he thought he was, isn't who Natalie thought he was, and may have been connected to the mafia. But of course Natalie doesn't know any of this, and when she first meets Cage, they have undeniable chemistry. They really want to be with each other. Cage very much becomes obsessed with her, and you know, wants to make her his woman, and they have a very intense and passionate relationship. But of course it's not going to be too long before Natalie figures out that something isn't quite right about this situation and starts to investigate, which, you know, really kind of like escalates this plot, makes it really good. So it's part mystery, we don't really know what's going on, Natalie's trying to piece it all together. Yeah, I just love everything about this one. I love the dialogue, the banter, the characters, the mafia sort of backstory, and this touch of mystery in this one, so absolute favourite. Of course, I also wanted to give a shout out to this one here, Dom by S.J. Tilley, which I think was my favourite of last year. This is book 3 in the Alliance series, and in this one we're following Val and Dom. I absolutely love Dom as a mafia hero. He's like head of the mafia in Chicago. He is everything we want in a mafia hero. I love the relationship between these 2. I love his intensity in this one. Some of the things he does to Val are absolutely outrageous, in order to you know, make sure that she knows that she belongs to him. But I absolutely thought it was fantastic and really loved it. So I've talked about this a few times before, but wanted to give a shout out to this one as well. So I think Ruthless Creatures is my absolute favourite, but Dom is a very close second, and I really did enjoy it, so I would highly recommend. So then after mafia romances, my next favourite type of romance to read is a dark romance. And again, I'm fairly new to dark romances. I probably have read dark romances before 2020, like I said, but not any that I specifically remember. And I also count this as a slightly different category to mafia romances, because yes, mafia romances could also be classed as dark, but I don't really feel, to me, a mafia romance isn't necessarily always a dark romance, and this kind of therefore sits in its own category. But I absolutely dove straight into the deep end when I was reading this, because I ended up reading Sick Heart by J.A. Huss. And I picked this one up because I was kind of on a bit of a sports romance kick at the time. I was reading some MMA romances, and I basically picked this one thinking this was an MMA fighter romance, which it absolutely is, but it's also a very, very dark story, and I wasn't expecting it at all. So from that perspective, you know, it was quite shocking to me, but also highly addictive, and I then went on to seek out more dark romances as a result. So in this particular story, we're following Court Van Breda and Anya. Now, essentially, this one is like an underground fighting ring. The Court Van Breda is like a prize fighter. He belongs to somebody, so he's kind of owned. He doesn't have his own, you know, autonomy. He's pretty much a slave fighter and forced to fight in these kind of underground fights. Now, the person that owns him owns a number of other fighters, and they also have this like camp, this like fighting camp, where they teach people how to fight and bring them up through the ranks, as it were, in order to fight these fights. Now, when they actually go into battle with another team, it is usually a fight to the death. And so only the strongest sort of survive. And Court Van Breda has now won 35 fights, and he has to win something like 40 fights or something like that in order to win his freedom. So he's got one more round of fighting to do, and also one more sort of season of camp where he's going to train other fighters. And this is kind of the start of this story. The heroine is part of a different camp, so she is a woman that belongs to a different camp of fighters, so a rival to the one that Court Van Breda is part of, but she is also considered like a prize. So not only if you win a fight do you keep your life, which is prize enough, but also these fighters are often given women as prizes. So they can spend the night with them, but also it's kind of a part of this really, really kind of like dark and disturbing breeding program where they are allowed to sleep with these women, because the best fighters then get to produce offspring, which hopefully then will grow up to be the best fighters. And kind of this is kind of how this whole scenario works. So like I said, it's very, very dark, very, very disturbing. And at the start of this book, Court Van Breda is almost fighting his very final fight. He's trying to earn his freedom. He is one of the best, but of course his owner doesn't want him to go. He doesn't want to give him his freedom. No one has ever earned that before. And so there's some underhand dirty dealings going on where they're going to try and rig this fight and take Court Van Breda out, basically. Anya is thrown into the ring at the last minute, and she kind of helps Court Van Breda to survive and take out his opponent, which then turns like his owner and everything into a bit of turmoil, not sure what to do. But Court Van Breda takes Anya as his prize, and then basically leaves this fight area and goes back to their sort of camp where he would normally train other people to fight. And then Court Van Breda and Anya then are in this kind of on this island, this very, very remote island, and there's nothing there to do but kind of train. Now, what's very intriguing between these couple is both of them have chosen to remain silent, so they're both mute characters, but it's through choice, and because they are pretty much, like I say, slaves. They're forced to do terrible things, and their only way to control, like one of the few things that they control basically is whether or not they speak, and they've chosen to not speak. And so this is a very interesting book as well. Not only is it quite dark, there's some very harsh things that happen in here, it's quite disturbing in parts. But then when they go to this island and they're kind of there by themselves and they don't speak to each other and there's nothing really to do, like I say, other than train, it is a great example of how this book is just held together by its silences almost, and how you can communicate in so many ways. You don't necessarily need words, and of course as they're together and they're like, you know, figuring out what's next for them, this is basically where their relationship starts to go. So not the most romantic of books, but definitely dark, definitely dark. So then, what is my favourite dark romance that I've read since then? Well, this is so hard because I absolutely love a dark romance and there's so many fantastic ones. So I've got a handful here that I'm going to show you that I actually own, and I'm going to kind of whiz through them because I've talked about them all quite a bit. The first one is Deliver by Pam Godwin. This is book 1 in her Deliver series. This is a book about a woman called Liv who basically kidnaps a young man called Josh, and then she takes him basically, and a goal is to break him and train him to be someone's sex slave, because ultimately he's going to be sold into sex slavery. And so I thought this was a very interesting take, because normally it's the man taking a woman captive and doing the training, but this one is kind of a reverse story where it's the woman who is the aggressor in this story, but also a fascinating and mysterious read. So this one had me on the edge of my seat because it's a mystery in here. Who is this woman? Why is she taking Josh? Who else is involved? What's going on? What's like, you know, what is her motivation? And Josh also figuring out how he's going to make a connection with her to escape, but also to save her, because he realizes that, you know, things are not what they seem, and maybe she is not choosing to do this and someone else is pulling the strings. So I absolutely found this fascinating. Again, extremely dark. The characters are in some very, very difficult situations, so it's quite challenging to read, but absolutely was on the edge of my seat throughout. And everything else I've read by Pam Godwin I've absolutely loved. And of course this year I would be remiss of me not to mention Hills of Shivers and Shadows, which is book 1 in the Frozen Freight trilogy. I absolutely love this first book in the series, as well as book 2, Cage of Ice and Echoes, and anxiously awaiting the arrival of book 3 in this series. This one follows Frankie, who is kidnapped by a man called Denver, taken to a very, very remote cabin in Alaska, where she finds herself not only with Denver but 3 of his sons, and then basically it's a story of kind of like survival and how she is going to basically earn back her freedom, but also why she's there, what they want with her, who these people are, how they're connected, and all of that good stuff. So again, an absolute masterpiece from Pam Godwin. She has me on the edge of my seat every single time. You absolutely cannot go wrong if you like a dark romance. Would highly recommend. Another one that I absolutely found fascinating, challenging to read, but so emotional, was this one here, Still Beating, by Jennifer Hartmann. In this one we're following Cora and Dean, and basically Dean is engaged to Cora's sister. They've known each other for a long time. Dean and Cora don't really get on that much. They're always kind of antagonising each other, and one night they are all out having drinks. The sister is there as well, and they're kind of all out with friends. Everyone leaves apart from Cora, and then she stays a little bit longer, and then she wants to leave and she doesn't have any way to get home, so she calls Dean asking for a lift. So he comes to pick her up, and then on the way home they are then pulled over onto the side of the road and kidnapped by this man, and then they are basically kept in like a basement together, chained up in this basement, and they are basically kept captive together. And it's basically then their story of how they're going to survive in this place, the relationship that they form between them, and when they finally do get free, because they do escape this place, the ramifications of what happens to them, and what happens to their relationship when they're finally kind of escape, and having to come to terms with what happened to them, and being each other's safe place when no one else really understands what they've been through. So I absolutely loved that one. Another one that I really want to mention is Take Me With You by Nina G. Jones. Again, absolutely love this one. It's another sort of kidnapping tale where this man takes this woman captive, keeps her in like a very, very small sort of cabin, like shed, in a very remote place near his property. And really just a very, very interesting story of how they can possibly form a relationship in a situation where he is literally keeping her in a cabin in the woods. Fascinating read, and really, really enjoyed this one. Really challenging how Nina G. Jones could make me really, really like the character, the hero, the anti-hero, and really root for him and how this couple were going to end up together after what he'd done. And then I couldn't not talk about a Sam Mariano book. Sam Mariano is also a fantastic dark romance author, and I think one of my favourites from her is this one here, Untouchable. And this is a high school bully romance where our main hero in this one, Carter, sexually assaults our heroine right at the start of this book, but then becomes absolutely obsessed with her and is very, very manipulative, and manipulates her into a relationship with him because he won't take no for an answer. She doesn't really have any choice, but they are a very fascinating couple. Zoe is an interesting heroine in this one because, like I say, although Carter is very manipulative, Zoe is also very aware of who Carter is. She's very intrigued by him. She really wants to understand him more, and figure out, you know, what's in his head, and they make a very, very interesting couple, and again a couple that I was highly rooting for to get together before the end. So that's first and favourites of Mafia romances and dark romances. I'm already, you know, nearly half an hour into this video. Hopefully I can cut some elements, but hopefully I'll be able to move more quickly through the other subgenres because I've got 6 more to go. So next up is sports romances. So this first sports romance that I remember reading is Puck Me Secretly by Odette Stone. This is book 1 in the Vancouver Wolves series. It's an ice hockey romance, and in this one we're following Max and Rory. Basically, right at the very start of this book, Max is our ice hockey player. He's on a plane because he's on his way to Vancouver, where he's going to join a new team. He's just been signed with the Vancouver Wolves and he's on his way to Vancouver to join the new team, and he happens to be sitting next to Rory, who is also on her way to Vancouver, because we find out that she is the daughter of the GM of this team. Of course, on the flight they don't actually know each other, but while they're on this plane, there is really bad turbulence. There's something wrong with the plane and it ends up crashing. Now fortunately they are very shaken but not severely injured, but after this plane crash, obviously they crash, and then the airline has to put them up in a hotel overnight, where they kind of like then try and get them onward to the next destination, and because they've been sitting next to each other, they have kind of formed this sort of trauma bond, told each other things that they perhaps wouldn't tell each other normally, and then when they get back to this hotel, they decide they're going to spend the night together. And of course then they leave each other the next day, go on about their business, but it's only a couple of days later when Max turns up to work, and Rory also happens to be there, and they kind of recognise each other and then realise that they're going to be working together, because she has come to work for her dad at this in this ice hockey team, so they're going to be seeing each other much more frequently. However, then this becomes sort of like a taboo, forbidden romance, because obviously she is now the boss's daughter, and he really doesn't want to cause any trouble while he's there. So that was my first experience, and a great experience for a sports romance. And I've read quite a lot of sports romances since. I really like ice hockey romances, but I think my favourite sports romance that I've read to date is The Right Move by Liz Tomforde. This is book 2 in the Windy City series, and this one is actually a basketball romance, because our hero Ryan Shea is a basketball player, and our heroine in this one is Indy. Now in terms of the tropes in this one, we have best friend's brother, it's fake dating, it's a roommate situation, and so therefore it's forced proximity, like close proximity with these two. Now Indy is our main heroine, and she is best friends with Ryan Shea's sister, who was the main heroine from book 1. Indy is recently split up with a boyfriend, so she doesn't have anywhere to live, and since his sister has recently moved out to go and, you know, live with her new boyfriend, Ryan has now got a spare room, and Indy goes to live with Ryan. Now Ryan is an interesting character. He's an absolutely great guy, but he's chosen to remain celibate, so he hasn't had a girlfriend in a long time. He also likes a neat and orderly kind of life, and Indy is kind of just a whirlwind. She comes into his apartment and, like, you know, adds throws and pillows and puts her books everywhere, and basically makes a bit of a mess, and Ryan at first is very frustrated by all of this and her being in his space, but very, very quickly they form a very good friendship and start to get on really well with each other. Now this turns then into a fake dating situation from here, because Indy needs someone to go with her to her friend's wedding where her ex-boyfriend is going to be, so she kind of needs a boyfriend to go with her so the ex-boyfriend doesn't feel sorry for her. And meanwhile Ryan Shea needs a girlfriend because his like the GM of his basketball team, basically, the owner, has suggested that maybe Ryan needs to loosen up a little bit, and that might help if he got himself a girlfriend. So they kind of then temporarily enter this like fake dating arrangement, but it's not too long, of course, until the fake dating situation turns into something more, and their relationship goes from there. And like I said, I absolutely love this one. I love fake dating tropes. It's one of my favourite tropes. but also Ryan Shea in here is the absolute perfect boyfriend. Some of the things he does is so thoughtful, so swoony, such a nice guy, and just thoroughly enjoyed the read, so would highly recommend. Next up we've got monster romances. So the first monster romance that I read was Soul Eater by Lily Mayne, and this is book 1 in the Monstrous series. It's also an MM romance as well. We are following Wyn and Danny, and this is kind of like a dystopian sort of future version of Earth, if you like, because essentially what's happened is that there are these like portals where these monsters come through, and now quite a lot of the world is kind of a bit of a wasteland, and there are human sort of towns or like sort of forts that are fairly well protected and fairly safe, but they're obviously overpopulated, and if you kind of are living in there, then you're kind of forced to also enter the military, because then the military try and fight these monsters that are mainly found out in these wastelands and things like that. We have a variety of monsters though. Some are, you know, mindless killing monsters, some are very intelligent, kind monsters, a whole variety, and there are also groups of humans who don't want to live in the main societies, don't want to be part of the military, and are kind of taking their chances out in the wild and have formed their own little ring fence community. So that's kind of like the state of play with this kind of world. And then in this particular one we're following Wyn and Danny. Now Wyn is a monster. He's a kind of monster that turns up every 10 years or so, and when he turns up he literally kills everything in his path. People are really scared of him. When he appears, you know, that everyone freaks out because they know they're going to die, and for all intents and purposes he sounds like he's a pretty bad character. Now Danny is our human. He is basically in the military, and he is sent to fight when Wyn turns up, and he's kind of in the battle with all these other soldiers, and he's kind of facing off against Wyn, and they're trying to kill him, but Wyn is very powerful, and of course he's going to take out anyone that kind of confronts him. However, he sees something in Danny. We don't know what it is, but he definitely sees something in Danny, and Danny basically survives this encounter, and Wyn deliberately lets himself get taken and put into a holding cell because he's very intrigued by Danny and wants to learn more. And of course Wyn refuses to talk to anybody except for Danny, and then they kind of send Danny in to kind of speak to Wyn to figure out who he is, why he's there, how dangerous he is, but also why he spared Danny's life, and you know, what he's going to tell Danny. Like I said, he is very powerful though, and so once he has had enough in this cell, he then ensures his escape and gives Danny the choice to stay where he is or go with him. And of course Danny then chooses to go with Wyn, and they start this bit of road trip, and Danny tries to figure out, you know, who this guy is. But the more they spend time together, the more they really like each other and eventually fall in love. So I absolutely thoroughly enjoyed that monster romance, and it was a fantastic read, which I highly recommend, and the other books in that series are really good as well. So then I was thinking, so if that's so good, what is my favourite? And I've settled on Viper by Naomi Lucas, which is book 1 in the Naga Bride series, because I really enjoyed the series. When I first read Viper, I went on to read 2 or 3 books straight after each other because it really sucked me in. I really liked the premise and the concept of this one, and essentially we have again a future version of Earth. The humans had to kind of escape Earth because it was no longer inhabitable. They picked a battle with the wrong aliens basically, and they left the planet uninhabitable, and so the humans are now kind of like, you know, live in the stars, in spaceships, colonized other planets, but Earth is no longer open to them. However, several thousand years have passed. I think 1500 years maybe have now passed, and they are now in another battle with a different set of aliens, and they need technology which they know they've left behind on Earth, and so they kind of send this party down to Earth, one to see if it's now inhabitable, but also to see if they can get their hands on some of this technology they know they've left behind. And when they get back to Earth, basically this small group of people get back to Earth, and they find then the planet is now occupied by these Nagas, which are half human, half snake hybrids, and they are only men, all of their women are gone, and so now the Nagas are very, very interested in the human women. So the human men do a deal with the Nagas and basically say, you know, if you tell us where the technology is, we'll give you our women. And so they make this deal, and they kind of throw 3 unsuspecting humans into literally the viper's nest, as it were, the snake pit, and then these snakes kind of fight over these women to see who's going to reign supreme. And this first book we are following Vrushka, who is our viper, and Gemma, who becomes basically his woman. It's also a fated mate scenario, so don't worry. You know, she struggles at first, but eventually is more than happy to spend time with Vrushka. I just really liked the relationship between this couple, but also the kind of the backstory and sort of the intrigue in terms of what's going on and politically what's going on. And as we've gone through the series, we've learnt more and more about how these Nagas came to be there, what's going on in the universe, and all of that good stuff. But of course, it's a standard. You know, these Nagas are alpha males. They become very obsessed and possessive over their women, and it's a fated mate scenario as well. So once they've captured them, they're never going to let them go, which I really love as well. Okay, so then I've got small town romances. So the very first small town romance that I read was Out of My League by Jessica Prince, and this is book 1 in the Hope Valley series. There's quite a lot of books in this series, so if you really like Jessica Prince, which I do, I haven't read her for a while, but she's got some pop star romances as well as different small town romances as well. I really enjoyed her stories and like whizzed through the majority of the books in this series, so would highly recommend. In this particular book, we're following Lincoln and Eden, and Lincoln is ex-military. He is now out of the armed forces, and he's kind of set up his own security company. So it naturally follows then that this story would also be kind of a little bit suspenseful. So this is not only small town, but romantic suspense. He has definitely got a protector element, so you'll see when I start to talk about the story that he's definitely there to protect her and save her. And there's a bit of a mystery going on with this one as well. Our heroine is Eden, and she's basically new in town. She's just moved into a house a couple of doors down from Lincoln, so they are kind of neighbours. And she has come from a very unhappy past. She doesn't really get on with her family. They've really treated her badly, and in particular her brother is causing a lot of problems. He's in with the wrong crowd. And you know, and the type of person that always constantly is asking for money and, you know, doing bad things, and is really not a great guy. You know, she takes an instant like to Lincoln. He is a very handsome man. He's got a great physique, and of course he owns his own company, so a great catch. But Lincoln doesn't necessarily notice her straight away until around town there starts to be these break-ins. People are starting to get kind of injured, as well as things going missing, and Lincoln kind of gets involved to try and figure out what's going on. And then Eden is kind of like in the crosshairs, and he kind of then has to kind of like spend a bit more time with her because he starts to suspect that somehow she's connected to what's going on. And you know, he wants to stay close so we can figure things out. But as they spend more time together, obviously they're going to develop feelings for each other, and their romance is going to go from there. So I really enjoyed this book and the series, like I said, although it's been quite a number of years since I've read it. Since then, I've read quite a few small town romances, although they aren't my favourite. But I think my favourite one that I have read is Heartless by Elsie Silver. This is book 2 in the Chestnut Springs series. We're following Cade and Willa, and in this one it is not only small town, but it's age gap. It's sort of like a cowboy romance because Cade owns his own ranch. Willa is hired as a nanny because he's a single dad, and she's going to be a living nanny as well, so they're going to be living together in close proximity together. So lots of tropes in this one. I'm sure you've heard about this. I've definitely spoke about it on more than one occasion, but essentially Cade Eaton is looking for a nanny for the summer for his little boy Luke. Willa is offered to him, ends up being his only choice really, and he's not too happy about it at first. But Willa definitely, you know, gets under his skin, and he can't help but like her. In fact, they're very attracted to each other, and she is a fantastic nanny, fantastic with Luke. you know, they're going to be in close proximity together, so they're not going to help themselves but start a relationship, and it's absolutely fantastic. Highly recommend. And Kate Eaton is another great example of a fantastic book boyfriend for sure. The next subgenre I wanted to talk about was erotic romances or erotica romances, and the first one that I ever remember reading was 50 Shades of Grey. I think a lot of people have probably read that book, but that was quite a number of years ago, and so when I was going back through my records in terms of like since I started recording what books I'd read since about 2020, I think the first one that I wanted to talk about today was Wrong by Adelaide Forrest. So this is actually currently a banned book, but it's part of the Heaven and Hell kind of series, and it's set around this kind of sex club, and there's Heaven and Hell parts of this sex club. Now the reason this is banned is for many reasons. Not only is there's a big age gap between these two, there's also non-consent in this one. The main hero in this one is Landon, who happens to be the heroine's dad's best friend. So basically she's known him all her life as Uncle Landon, so they're not strictly you know, uncle and niece, but he's known her all her life basically. So this is very sort of taboo from that side of things, and essentially what happens in this is a little bit of a case of mistaken identity, because our hero in this one, Landon, has a sexual preference to have consensual non-consent. He chooses his partners via the kind of sex club that he's a member of, and he enters into contracts specifically with women who are happy to do this. Now he has basically recently entered into a contract with a new woman he's not met before. They agree to all of their terms and what's expected, and they create this scenario where they're going to meet in a coffee shop, and then he's going to follow her back to her car and you know, take her back to the sex club and have his wicked way with her, and she's going to pretend she doesn't want anything to do with it. Now, like I said, this is a case of mistaken identity, because when he meets this person in the place he's supposed to meet her, the person who's sitting where this woman should be sitting is Everly, which is his best friend's daughter. And he cannot believe it. At first he's like, oh, what am I going to do? I can't believe Everly is into this. I can't believe she is contracted to this. But actually this is a great opportunity, because I've actually always secretly had the hots for her. So now this is my perfect opportunity. So of course, because this is a consensual non-consent situation, when she protests, he thinks it's part of the act, and then things go from there. So this is one of the main reasons this book is banned, I assume. But yeah, like I say, I dove straight into this one and got myself into a right rabbit hole with that one for sure. So then, what is my favourite erotic sort of romance? And I think it is a recent read. It's this one here, The Best Man by Sam Mariano. This is a standalone, and as you can see, quite a short read. It's like just novella length, about 143 pages. And in this one, we're following quite a few characters, but the couple in this one, the couple that end up together, is Marcus and Jessa. Now, essentially, Jessa is due to marry Marcus's brother. It's literally the night before the wedding, and she's gone out on a hen night. He's gone out on the stag night. She comes home early from the hen night though, and you know, goes up to the bedroom. The boys are still in the living room having fun with some strippers and things like that, and Marcus comes into the bedroom to get some condoms essentially from the drawer, and then he realizes that Jessa is home and is in bed, and then this gives him a fantastic idea. And then what follows basically from here is that he is going to trick her into ending up sleeping with not only him but all of the other brothers and father, and then finally bring her fiance back into the room. And when the fiance finds out, he is like horrified. He can't believe that Marcus has tricked everybody in terms of what's happened, and then basically says he can't marry her. But of course the wedding is the following day. He doesn't want to call it off and look bad in front of all his friends and family, and so she thinks the wedding is definitely going to be off. Except Marcus, we find out, has done all of this because he wants Jessa for himself. So Like I said, a very, very quick, short read, very, very spicy indeed, and I think definitely my favourite in this category. Then next we have Omegaverse romances. So the first one that I read was the Alpha Awakens by Anna Fury. It was book 1 in the Alpha Compound series. I absolutely loved this one, and it is a dystopian shifter romance. It's MF and fated mates, and we're following Mallory and Orion. In this kind of universe, essentially what's happened is that there's been some sort of virus, and some of the men are catching this virus, and when they kind of catch this virus they turn into alphas, and they kind of go through this transition period. So when they first catch the virus, they kind of transition into alphas, and they go through quite a scary period where they seem to be, you know, angry snarling beasts who are very, very dangerous and will cause a problem for the general public. Lots of people have seen these transitions. It's pretty horrifying to watch them sort of transform. And essentially all they do is get bigger and stronger, but also, like, you know, like I say, at first they appear to be quite sort of angry and violent. However, once this initial transition is over, and it doesn't last very long at all, they kind of like go back to being their normal selves, apart from now they've transformed into these alphas. But still, the population are very, very scared of them. The military have pretty much rounded up as many alphas as they can, and they're kind of being imprisoned and experimented on, but also there's quite a lot of alphas who have escaped, that live kind of nomadically and on their own, and some that have created communities. So in this particular one, we've got the Alpha Compound, which is basically a place, a safe place for alphas to go and live and be by themselves. But of course, what they really desperately want to do is have their voices heard, share the story with the population, and basically stop the military from coming after them so that they can reintegrate back into society. And so basically this is where Mallory enters the picture, because Mallory is a journalist, and they invite Mallory to go and stay with them in the compound, to see how they live, talk to them, get their stories about what's happened to them and all of that, and you know, prove that they aren't violent and they deserve a chance to reintegrate into society. And Orion is our main sort of character in this one, who is tasked with you know, going to collect Mallory, bring her to the compound, keep an eye on her while she's there, and of course they're going to form a relationship, end up finding out that they're kind of fated mates, and their romance goes from there. So really, really enjoy this one and the rest of it as well. That is still remains one of my favourite Omegaverses, I have to say, but I also discovered an author called Marlo Roy, who has only written a few romances, but they are exceptional, really, really good. And so my favourite is this one here, which is the Alpha's Resurrection, which is book 3 in her After End series. In this one we're following Zora and Jake. Now this is also kind of a dystopian, post-apocalyptic kind of world as well. Also an MF, so not a why choose, fated mates, and surprisingly for Omegaverse, because I know with the fated mates they're normally straight into the action, as it were, but this one is surprisingly a really interesting slow burn, and I really, really did enjoy this one. So in this kind of world, what's happened is there's this kind of apocalypse situation happens, where, you know, really bad things happen, and now lots of humans have died, and the ones that remain are kind of like living without technology in sort of like much smaller communities, or some people have transformed into alphas, some are omegas and some are betas. So the sort of the standard categories that you would normally find in an Omegaverse. Now there's some old ones who were human before this apocalypse happened and have now kind of transitioned in their world, and they're kind of like long lived, so they're like, you know, over 100 years old, and Jake is one of those people. So he was alive before the end, and now he has transitioned to be an alpha in the after end, but he has taken a terrible toll on him, just the experience of going through the apocalypse, what happened afterwards in the aftermath, transforming into an alpha. Obviously there was lots of bad people, lots of sort of like imprisonments, encampments, you know, gangs that would roam and kill and pillage and all of that sort of stuff. So Jake has seen quite some horrors, and as a result, for a long time he wasn't really in his right mind. We saw him in books 1 and 2, and he has been given a second chance, but the second chance has come at a cost because he's allowed to live in this special community with other alphas and omegas, but he's not allowed to go near any omegas because they just don't trust him based on his previous actions. But Zora is an omega. She is coming to stay with their kind of like their group for the summer because she's come to help babysit some newborns, but her real town is further up the river basically. Now she just wanted some time away from her family because they're trying to force her into a marriage with this other alpha that she doesn't particularly want to marry, and she's come to this kind of like their kind of encampment, their sort of town if you like, hoping that she's going to find someone else, and she does, and she finds Jake, and Jake and her form this very, very special bond. But of course Jake knows he can't go near her. He's basically been told he can't go near an omega, but they become really good friends, kind of meet up in secret, and he teaches her how to swim and things like that. So they start to form this very, very beautiful relationship and friendship. But like I say, it is a slow burn because although they do want to be with each other, Jake is very, very cautious, and he doesn't want to, you know, do anything that he shouldn't, that's going to get him into trouble, get her into trouble, and all of that sort of stuff. But of course finally their relationship is going to head in that direction, and that is going to potentially cause some problems not only for Jake but also for the other camp and the other alpha who wants to marry Zora. But absolutely loved it, would highly recommend, and I've loved everything I've read by Marlo Roy so far. Okay, finally for today's video I want to talk about sci-fi and alien romances. Now the first one I read was Possessed by Tana Stone. This is book 1 in the Raider Warlords of the Vandar series. There are a number of books in the series, and I really enjoyed the first 6. I've recently read book 7, which I didn't love as much, but a really sort of fun, fast-paced read. The aliens in this one very much remind me of the Klingons from Star Trek, because essentially the Raider Warlords of the Vandar are these aliens who kind of operate in hordes. The Raz is the head of each of the hordes, and they command a fleet of warships, and they are, you know, people are very, very scared of them because they're a kind of a war-like species, and like I say, they keep law and order in the universe and are always on the hunt. So the main hero in this one is Kratos. He is the Raz of his particular war band, and then we have Astrid, who is a human woman who is basically on a ship, like on a smuggling ship with her sister. Due to some technical difficulties, they end up in Vander space, and they are picked up by Raz's warbird basically, and he's not happy that they've wandered into his territory. They're really, really scared of him. He's kind of like very menacing and threatening, and so Astrid basically says, I will sacrifice myself. I will be the one to stay here and be punished for this transgression of coming into your space accidentally if you just let my sister and her and the rest of her crew go. And so that's kind of what happens, and then she becomes his prisoner really on this warship. Of course she's going to stay in his cabin though, because they don't have jail cells. This is a kind of species that don't take prisoners, and so she's going to stay with him in his cabin, and things are going to go from there. But a really fun, fast-paced read, like I said, and really recommend. But my favourite sci-fi alien romance is Broken by the Horde King by Zoe Draven, which is book 4 in the Horde Kings of Dakar series. I absolutely love this one, and we were following the Kirin of Rat Achille and Maeva, and so again very similar to the previous one. In this one, this is planet based though. We're not in spaceships, we're planet based, but on this planet, the planet Dakari, the Dakar species operate in hordes. They have horde kings who kind of like look after individual sort of packs and armies. They're quite a nomadic race, but they kind of like, you know, live off the land, set up encampments, you know, and protect the planet basically in these kind of like war bands, these hordes. Now Maeva is human. She was taken in by the Dakari sort of people into this town, and growing up she was friends with Kirin, and they became very, very close friends. Now, he was always a prince, so he was always going to go on to lead his own horde, but as teenagers she very much falls in love with him, and then before he's due to go off to train to be this horde king, if you like, Maeve kind of approaches him and offers herself to him, and he rejects her in a very, very humiliating and upsetting way, and Maeve is heartbroken. She's left heartbroken, but also very embarrassed about this. And then he goes away and she stays in town, and then trains to be a healer, trying to lick her wounds and mend her broken heart. And he eventually is going to come back many years later, and he's going to need a healer for his war band, his horde. And he's going to ask Maeve to do the job, and of course at first she's going to say no because she doesn't want anything to do with him. She's still you know, very, very unhappy about what's happened, but he's going to convince her to at least stay for the season, and then of course they're going to be in close proximity together, and they're going to work things out from what happened in the past. I really, really love this one, particularly the pining between this couple, because you know, you could really feel how hurt Maeve was, and it was really, really nice to see when they finally got their HEA. So there we go. I knew it was going to be a long one, and I'm so glad I split this in half because I've still got another 8 subgenres to go. So if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you made it this far, thank you so much. Thanks for sticking with me. It'd be great if you could leave a comment for me in the comment section down below. Let me know some of your first and favourites in these categories as well. And look out for part 2 in a couple of months' time, where I'll be talking about MC romances, historical romances, paranormal, billionaire, BDSM, contemporary and pop star romances. So all that's left to say is thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye. And like I said, look out for part 2 in the next couple of weeks. And so, because I've still got 8 subgenres to go, who operate in kind of and in this one we are following Marcus Jesser. I'll just write that down because I didn't know her name, Jesser. Eden takes an instant like to Lincoln. He is, you know, he is very handsome, very strong, very and everything I've loved that I've read by Pam